conditions that would ground modern aircraft. Planes that have survived decades of abuse, countless hard landings, extreme weather, and neglect that would have destroyed lesser designs 10 times over. And here's what makes this even more incredible. You can buy these legendary, virtually indestructible aircraft for under $40,000 right now. Today, we're revealing 3 unkillable planes that represent the best value in aviation. Aircraft where your $40,000 investment gets you machines that will still be flying strong 50 years from now, that will survive mistakes that would total other aircraft, that require minimal maintenance because they were built like tanks from the very beginning. These aren't just cheap planes. These are aircraft with reputations for indestructibility earned through decades of real-world punishment, planes that mechanics shake their heads at in amazement because they just keep flying no matter what. We're counting down 3 aircraft that define what unkillable means, where number 1 is a plane so tough that there are examples still flying with original components from 70 years ago, a plane that survived crashes that should have destroyed it, a plane that's literally been rebuilt from wrecks multiple times. If you're looking for an aircraft that represents true value, true durability, true legendary toughness, stick around because these 3 planes will shock you with what $40,000 can buy. Number 3, Sportsman. At number 3, we have the Sportsman. And when we talk about unkillable aircraft, this utility bush plane defines the category. The Sportsman, whether we're talking about the Glacier Sportsman or similar utility aircraft designs in this category, represents modern engineering applied to creating an aircraft that can survive anything bush flying throws at it. And you can find excellent examples in the under $40,000 range, particularly kit-built models or older examples that have been well maintained. The Sportsman's unkillable nature starts with its construction. This is an aircraft built specifically for operating in conditions that would destroy conventional planes. The airframe uses heavy-gauge materials, robust construction techniques, and overbuilt structures that provide massive safety margins. The landing gear is the first clue to how tough this plane is. It's not delicate or lightweight, it's massive, with huge tires, substantial oleo struts or spring steel gear, and attachment points that can handle impacts from rough field landings that would collapse the gear on typical aircraft. The gear is designed to absorb punishment. Landing on gravel bars, dirt strips, tundra, unimproved fields, all the places where bush planes operate, creates impacts and stresses that normal aircraft simply cannot survive. The Sportsman's gear flexes, absorbs, and keeps working. Pilots report landing in conditions and on surfaces that they wouldn't dare attempt in conventional aircraft, and the Sportsman just takes it and asks for more. There are Sportsman aircraft operating in Alaska and the Canadian bush that have made thousands of rough field landings, and the gear is still functioning perfectly. The fuselage and wing structure are similarly overbuilt. The Sportsman uses construction techniques that prioritize strength over weight savings. The result is an aircraft that handles structural loads, turbulence, and aerodynamic stresses with huge margins. Bush flying means flying low in rough air, encountering mountain wave turbulence, dealing with strong winds and gusts, and the Sportsman's structure handles all of it without complaining. The power plant options for Sportsman aircraft typically include proven Lycoming engines in the 180 to 260 horsepower range. These are bulletproof engines that have decades of reliability history. With proper maintenance, these engines simply don't quit. And because the Sportsman is often owner-maintained, particularly kit-built examples, owners develop intimate knowledge of their aircraft and can address issues before they become problems. The systems on a Sportsman are intentionally simple. There are no complex electronics that can fail, no computerized engine management systems that require dealer service, no exotic materials that need specialized repair. Everything is straightforward, accessible and maintainable with basic tools and knowledge. This simplicity is part of what makes the aircraft unkillable. When something does need attention, You can fix it yourself in the field with basic supplies. The real-world evidence of the sportsman's toughness comes from the operators who fly them. Bush pilots in remote Alaska, outfitters in the Canadian wilderness, missionaries in developing countries, these operators choose sportsman aircraft because downtime isn't an option and reliability is literally life or death. These planes operate year after year with minimal maintenance facilities, flown hard in demanding conditions, and they just keep flying. That's the definition of unkillable. Number 2, Citabria. At number 2, we have the Citabria, an aircraft that's been proving its unkillable nature since the 1960s. The Citabria, built by Champion and later American Champion Aircraft, represents traditional aircraft construction done right. This is a tube and fabric aircraft built using techniques that have worked for a century, and you can find solid Citabria examples well under $40,000, with many in the $25,000 to $35,000 range. The Citabria's indestructibility starts with its fundamental construction. The fuselage is built from steel tubing, welded together to create a structure that's incredibly strong and damage-resistant. This isn't thin wall tubing or minimal structure. This is heavy-gauge steel formed into a framework that can handle enormous loads. The tube frame means that minor damage from ground incidents or hard landings often affects only the fabric covering, not the underlying structure. You can repair fabric relatively easily and inexpensively, getting the aircraft back in the air quickly. The fabric covering, while requiring periodic replacement, is actually part of what makes the Citabria unkillable. Unlike aluminum that can crack, dent and corrode, fabric can be patched, repaired and completely recovered relatively affordably. A Citabria with fabric damage from a ground incident might require a few $100s in materials and some labor to repair, while similar damage to an aluminum aircraft could total the plane. The ability to repair and recover the aircraft means Citabrias keep flying even after incidents that would end other aircraft's lives. The landing gear is legendary for its toughness. The Citabria uses spring steel main gear legs that flex and absorb landing impacts. These gear legs can handle extraordinarily hard landings, absorbing impacts that would collapse conventional gear. Student pilots learning tailwheel flying in Citabrias routinely make landings that would destroy other aircraft's gear, and the Citabria just bounces and keeps flying. The gear can be straightened if bent, doesn't have complex mechanisms to fail, and is fundamentally unkillable. The power plant options, typically Lycoming engines from 115 to 180 horsepower, are proven designs with excellent reliability. These engines, with basic maintenance, can run for thousands of hours and multiple overhauls. The simple carburetor and magneto-ignition system means there are no complex fuel injection systems or electronic ignitions to fail. The engine systems are so simple and proven that they're virtually bulletproof. The Citabria's aerobatic capability, while not everyone's mission, actually proves its structural toughness. This is an aircraft certified for aerobatics, meaning it's built to handle loads far beyond normal flight. The wings, the fuselage, the control surfaces, everything is strong enough to survive aerobatic maneuvering loads. This overbuilt structure means normal flying barely stresses the aircraft, contributing to its legendary longevity. The real evidence of the Citabria being unkillable comes from the fleet still flying. There are Citabrias from the 1960s and 1970s still flying regularly, aircraft that have accumulated thousands of hours and multiple fabric recoverings, but the underlying structure is still solid. Flight schools have operated Citabrias for decades, subjecting them to student pilot abuse that would destroy lesser aircraft, and the Citabrias just keep flying. Owners report buying Citabrias, flying them hard for years, and selling them for prices close to what they paid, because well-maintained Citabrias hold their value due to their reputation for indestructibility. Survive you, your children, and possibly your grandchildren if maintained properly. The Pitts Special's unkillable nature starts with construction that's frankly overbuilt. This aircraft was designed for unlimited aerobatics, meaning it's built to handle loads up to 12 Gs positive and 9 Gs negative, forces that far exceed anything encountered in normal flight or even most unusual attitudes. The steel tube fuselage is incredibly robust. The wooden wing spars are massive. The fabric covering is doped and reinforced. Every component is built to survive stresses that would tear other aircraft apart. The biplane configuration actually contributes to the toughness. The two wings, braced with struts and wires, create a structure that's incredibly rigid and strong. The lift loads are distributed across 4 wing attachment points rather than 2, meaning each point bears less load and there's redundancy. The wire bracing between wings creates a truss structure that's extraordinarily resistant to damage. You could damage one wing significantly, and the structure would likely hold together long enough to land. The landing gear is a work of art in toughness. The Pitts uses simple spring steel gear legs, similar to the Citabria, but even more robust. These legs can handle the hardest landings imaginable. Aerobatic pilots routinely make arrivals that would be considered crashes in other aircraft, and the Pitts gear just absorbs it and keeps working. The gear can be bent, straightened, bent again, and it keeps functioning. There are Pitts aircraft that have survived gear-up landings, been repaired, and continue flying. The engine options, typically 180 to 260 horsepower Lycoming engines, are bulletproof power plants that, with proper care, run for thousands of hours. The inverted fuel and oil systems required for aerobatics are actually simpler and more reliable than complex fuel injection systems on modern aircraft. The magneto ignition is bomb-proof, working without any electrical power, meaning even if your entire electrical system fails, the engine keeps running. What truly makes the Pitts unkillable is the construction quality and the ability to rebuild. Because of the tube and fabric construction, a Pitts can be completely rebuilt after damage that would total other aircraft. There are Pitts aircraft that have crashed, been bent, twisted and mangled, that have been rebuilt and returned to airworthy condition. The steel tubing can be straightened or replaced, the fabric recovered, the components rebuilt, and the aircraft lives again. This isn't theoretical. There are documented cases of Pitts aircraft rebuilt multiple times after accidents. The Pitts community supports this unkillable nature. Owners who've rebuilt Pitts multiple times share knowledge freely. Parts, while somewhat specialized, are available from dedicated suppliers who support the type. The construction techniques, while requiring skill, aren't exotic or impossible for dedicated owners to learn. This means a Pitts can potentially live forever, being maintained, repaired, and rebuilt by successive generations of owners. So there you have it, 3 unkillable aircraft you can buy for under $40,000, from the bush-tough Sportsman to the simple rebuildable Citabria to the bomb-proof Pitts Special. These aircraft represent true value because they don't just survive, they thrive despite decades of use and abuse. Subscribe and enable notifications for more content exposing the best values in aviation. Comment below, sharing which of these 3 unkillable aircraft you'd choose and why. Your aircraft journey could start with one of these legends. Thanks for watching, and remember, true value isn't buying cheap. It's buying something built so well it refuses to die.